Bob, good morning. Arno here, Branche Landscapes. Thank you for joining us on our COVID-19 Insights of the Greats interviews. You were part of our book, Gardens of the Greats, not a long time ago. So it is fantastic to have you back with us and sharing this time your insights on the COVID-19 situation. So you've been through economic crisis, recessions, and hard times during your time. How did you manage it?
Bonjour, and I'm feeling privileged to be talking to you again. The book is a splendid example of people that love gardens. Well, this is the time to love gardens because this is a time of crisis, global crisis, which none of us predicted, although we thought it might happen, but it always was going to happen to somewhere else and somebody else, and now has come to our door. I can remember the first crisis, which was the polio epidemic when I was 7 years old, when we stopped all schools in New Zealand. And many of my friends were affected by polio. And I remember the horror of that, of seeing children for the rest of their life with a disabled limb on crutches. But nothing prepared us, I think, for what is happening now. And so we need more resilience, we need more strength, and we need more gardens. We need the pleasure of a garden, and that's where I have always taken my strength, from the planting and the natural world.
So did you have a special mindset that kept you going through those hard times?
Yes, I've always been a swimmer, I have to say. And I've always used the ocean where I've swum and the beach where I've taken a big part of my life as a lifeguard on the west coast of Auckland, New Zealand. And although I'm not there now, I have also a garden at my beach home. But the garden of my life is here. I have a large section, a half an acre section, which over the last 50 years, I'm celebrating with my wife 50 years in a house and a garden. And so it has been a spiritual and stable influence in my life. It's been, if you might say, I have a soul in a garden, because that is what I think you can always be a part of and be part of you, to be outside. So even though I am very strict with my rituals, I'm in lockdown as the whole of the country is, I will eat early in the morning and then go straight out into the garden and find something to work with.
So what are your coping mechanisms at the moment to stay healthy, both physically and mentally?
Well, I'm biking. I've been lucky to have a bike. I am lucky, this is my 80th year, to have had a physical life. And so my body craves exercise, and I go to the gym a lot, but now I'm in lockdown. I'm under house arrest by the government. I need to bike. We're allowed to bike, not to drive. And so I bike every day. This morning, after this interview, I will bike for 1 hour. I will bike to a local park and do that. But then I'll come back and start a garden. So the last week, I've moved an enormous amount of soil from one part of the garden to another. And when the planting season comes with the moon, I will start planting my clivias.
Just touching us on this, what is a typical day for you at the moment during this lockdown period, from sort of start to finish?
I think it's important that you don't let yourself become lazy. It's so easy to drift in not getting out of bed, for instance. I have rules. I think I'm like a monk. I get out of bed at 7. I shower, I shave, even though I'm not going to work. I shower, I put on a decent shirt, and then I have breakfast with my wife and we talk about the day. We talk about something we might have looked at last night on TV. We have great conversations. I think it's important that the touch and feel in your life is important. And I do feel for people that maybe live alone, that must be feeling very, very despondent and very in despair, that they have no one to touch. The human touch is so important. But I think in a way, plants offer that touch also. Plants that are living and beautiful are part of that. Even if it's a pot plant on the deck, I think living plants are very much a part of us and who we are. As you know, I wrote a big article on trees, on the kauri trees. And in researching that, it was clear that the trees are in communication. I think if there's one thing that I believe, the trees want us to understand their language. It's not a language of speech. It's a language of sound, I think. And I was inspired by that. And after I wrote the article, I got a terrific amount of feedback. People agreeing that something goes on in the soil between plants, trees, and indeed the natural world. It's a secret world. And it's a world that we actually don't quite understand and haven't given us enough time to understand. I think this is a time to understand the mysteries of the natural world.
So this is a challenge that many are facing at the moment. How do you manage your garden? And as you mentioned, it's fairly large. How do you manage it?
I manage it with love and time. I think that I kind of feel I know everything in that garden. I feel that I've planted those trees because when I came to this plant, this place, 50 years ago, it was just a scrub and a large piece of land that had been let to go with wild blackberries and gorse. I cleared that land and started to plant trees for fruit. I planted about 10. I was lucky to have a macadamia nut tree, which has to be 60 years old, maybe 65 years, and it still fruits beautifully. I've got about 500 nuts from it. So I've got some very old bamboo. I love bamboo. I think actually if you love plants, they love you. I think that they understand you. I don't know how, but you have to, I'm not saying talk to them, but you can do that too if you like. But I'm always looking at garden books, and yours is a superb book. I look at other people's gardens. I mean, I envy Mr. Monet, his beautiful garden. Not only did he have a great garden, he painted that garden. But I'm very conscious of landscaping. So there's lawn, there's space, and there's the natural palms area of my place, then the native section of my place, and then the flowers. I must admit I haven't been crazy about flowers as much as I have about clivias, which of course are flowers. But every year I plant about 200. I take the seeds, I plant them in planter boxes, and this new garden, which I've just made, can hardly wait for those clivias. I'll plant maybe 150 within 2 weeks. So I'm an avid gardener. I don't think about green fingers, although that's a nice term. I think everyone can do the green fingers. Sometimes I need advice. I think advice is how do you do that? Will this be right there? But I do know that this plant shouldn't be planted there. It's too shady, it's too wet. So the plants can't tell you, like animals can, look, don't do that with me, look after me. But so you have to judge where and how the plants are. So gardening books, which I do love, are hugely important to guide whether you're planting rhubarb or indeed spring bulbs. Someone else will tell you too early or too late. or just now. I think that's important, to have guides or mentors, gardening mentors. About 2 years ago, I had a windfall with bromelias. I hadn't been crazy about them. I am now. The big versions are just beautiful, spectacular. And I have no problem about what you might call plants from other countries. After all, the one thing we've learned, we're just one world. So everything belongs to everybody. And so if I find plants from Mexico, I mean, Clive is a South African. At the beach, I fell in love with the blood lily. I caught them at the right time. They were growing in I think in spring with this glorious flower. I now have about 40 of them. So when I fall in love with a plant, and the blood lily, which is South African, with this glorious leaf, which dies off and then comes back, but the flower is exquisite. It is so beautiful. I mean, the Queen of Sheba would have wanted one of these, you know. I mean, it's so ancient. You feel like this plant was known by the ancient world, you know, it's so beautiful. So there's a romance and history with plants.
So just to finish up, Bob, what would be your best piece of advice in those, coming times, uncertain times? What would be your best piece of advice?
My best advice is to be aware that the lessons that we've learned now is that we are a fragile species, that we have used and abused this planet's resources. This generation, which I've grown up in the last 80 years, has been the most destructive of all the generations of humankind, from the beginning to now. And this is payback time. I do believe that the planet has had a guts full of us, of destroying the ice in the Antarctic, the rainforests in the Amazon, the jungles of Africa, if you like. We have betrayed the trust that the planet gave us. And if we're going to be around for the next 500 years or 5,000 years, our behavior, our lifespan will depend on how we behave. This is truly a wake-up call that we cannot ignore. For climate change and the world we live in, and the world we're about to hand over to future generations, it's got to be a world of respect and trust. We haven't delivered that. We have abused this planet, and it's shaking us off like a dog shakes fleas.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your precious time and insights, Bob. Much appreciated. And if you want to see Bob's garden, please visit our website, branchelandscapes.com. Bob's garden is in there, and when you purchase the book Gardens of the Greats, you contribute to the New Zealand Art Foundations, where some of the proceeds are going towards the foundation. But yeah, so thank you very much, Bob. Much appreciated. We've been having your macadamias, so thank you very much for that as well.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you
so much. Bye bye.
Thank you.